exactly what he says. He's not ambiguous about it. He's not vague. He means exactly what he said. If he puts an A in front of a word, he meant for there to be an A there. If he puts the in front of it, there's supposed to be a the there. He's not just throwing out words. Jesus was exactly the same way. He didn't mince words, and he didn't make a mistake in what he said. Dr. Summerall was the first person that ever taught me that you can be spiritual and practical at the same time. And that made a profound difference in my life, because everywhere I'd been, people were just floating around waiting for something to happen. And Dr. Summerall would walk into a room and make things happen by his presence, by the Spirit of God in him. He once told me, he said, I've been 50 years, he said, it's been 50 years and I've never been out of the will of God. 50 years, never out of the will. Most of us can't go a week. You know, we think, well, I'm out of the will of God doing this and doing that. For the most part, that's your own conscience bothering you, which when you do that, you are out of the will of God, because you shouldn't be doing things your conscience bothers you. But before I met Dr. Summerall, early on, I made a vow, and I said, I want to know two things. I want to know how to know when I'm being led by the Spirit. And I want to know exactly what the will of God is. And I figured, because if I knew those two things, everything else would kind of line up and fall into place. So I met Dr. Summerall down in Houston, Texas. We were at a big convention, Word Explosion, John Osteen's church, and went into a minister's conference. Was sitting there, and they asked questions. I asked a few questions. When I got done, Dr. Summerall asked me where I live, and I told him, and he said, how soon can you get to South Bend? And I said, pretty quick. And he said, when you get there, come see me. So I jumped on the next bus and went up there. And when I got there, he was in his office, and they sent me on back, knocked on the door, went on in, sat down. He was writing, sitting over his desk, and was writing. I sat down on the couch, and it's like being in the principal's office. You know, you're kind of almost hoping he won't notice you, you know. And all of a sudden, he's sitting there, and I'm just kind of looking around, all this stuff on the walls, and he raises up, he looks at me, and he says, to know the will of God, read the Bible. To be led by the Spirit, do the Bible. Went right back down writing. I thought, well, I guess I can go home now. I just traveled 2,500 miles just to come hear that. That's the two things I wanted to know. Stayed a few more years up there and worked with the ministry there. But that changed my life, because that is how we've done everything. The reason we're doing what we did today is because of understanding those two principles. Read the Bible, do the Bible. You say, well, what about the areas that's not covered by the Bible? Well, that's whenever you get those special leadings that everybody wants to live in all the time. But until you're doing the general instructions, you're not going to get specific instructions. If you were to ask me, hey, how do I get to your house? Well, first off, from here I would tell you, come to Dallas. Well, actually, I'd tell you come to Tulsa now, because I should move there. But I'd say, come to Tulsa. When you get there, call me, and I'll tell you how to get there. Because if I told you how to get exactly to my house from here, by the time you got to Tulsa, it wouldn't mean anything to you. And you'd be trying to remember what I said and all the details. You don't need details yet. All you need is a general picture. Get in the general area, then I'll give you specifics. That's the way God does. He doesn't always give you specifics. If he did, there'd be no faith. You wouldn't have to walk anything out by faith. You'd have it all lined out, step by step. There'd be no faith involved. Matter of fact, a lot of things, if he told you what he wanted you to do, you wouldn't do them. Because you would hear, okay, yeah, wait a minute. No, we're not doing number 4. We're not going to do that. But instead, he'll take you a step at a time. When you get to number 4, right now you're at number 1. Number 4 may seem totally ridiculous and out of reach. Yeah. But if you go 1, 2, and 3, by the time you get to 3, all of a sudden 4 is possible because of the growth you've had along the way. But we want God to tell us every little detail before we'll act on anything. And I'm telling you, that is not the way God generally does it. Not for the most part. Now, in certain cases, he'll do that. He did some of that with Moses. So if you're going to lead roughly 3 to 5 million Jews, believe me, you want as many details as you can get. So, and if you're not doing that, you don't need that many details. Okay? So just get busy doing the general will of God, and whenever you get in certain areas and you need specifics, he will give you the specifics. Now, I've said a whole lot in this first part, and you kind of have to tell me, okay, I'm starting my timer, okay? there's a lot of things. It's kind of like going to a chiropractor. Most of the time, most people don't need major adjustments. They don't need surgery. They just need a few minor adjustments, and they're feeling better. And for the most part, most Christians don't need major changes. They just need a few minor adjustments here and there. But those minor adjustments make a world of difference. And obviously, I can't make major changes, but I can give you hints and lead you to places, because for the most part, even today, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. That's general law, church, business, anything. So out of this group, even though you're hungry enough to come out here on a Saturday morning, which says something, still, I know I may be talking to everybody, but not everybody's going to hear. So who I'm really talking to are the ones that are going to hear and do it. Because the others, you're just going to get mad and and come up with reasons why you can't. That's just the way it works. And I had a real problem with that in the beginning, and saying, God, I don't want to talk to people that's not going to do what I'm teaching. I could be anywhere. I don't have to travel to talk to people that ain't going to listen to me, okay? I can do that at home. I can do it anywhere. So I want people that are going to do what the Word of God says and be doing something with it. And in that, you have to realize that if what you have been doing was working, first off, and I'm talking about working in general, I wouldn't be here. The fact that you call me means that there's something you believe that God has either given me or told me that you should either know about or walk in or something, okay? In other words, you're sensing a need from God, and I can tell you this, for the most part, I've told the Lord many, many times, I will never preach by theory. I don't believe in it. I've seen too much damage be done by it. What I preach, I know it works. I've walked it. Okay, I'm not preaching things that I've read somewhere and haven't ever walked out and just because it sounded good. Everything I'm teaching you, I'm either doing, have done, in some stage of it, but it's not going to do. Okay, I don't teach by theory. I tell you what I know. Now, like I said last night, I don't know how many of you heard me, but to the carnally minded, faith sounds like arrogance. So a lot of times if I sound arrogant, if you know me, if you get to know me, I'm really not. Believe me, I know who I am and I know who I'm not, okay? And like I said last night, I'm just glad to be here. Glad that God will use me at all. There was a time in my life when I really wondered if he would ever use me again. And early on, in my BC years, I taught martial arts and then got with God, and then because of my own stupidity predominantly, basically fell away from God to the degree that I always knew God was there and there were certain things I would never do. I had my limits, but I was backslidden, just no way to get around it. And I went back to teaching martial arts because basically that was the only way I really knew to make a living and make somewhat decent money. And when I was teaching martial arts, there came a point, even my students, I'd get them born again. And I even told them, if you ever come here and there's a sign on the door that says closed, what it means is somebody pulled up out front with a tent and said, come preaching, tent revival, because I would close it that quick and go do it. And they all knew I was supposed to be preaching. And they knew that my ability to teach was a God-given ability. But I was using it for my own ends, just like Samson did. And in that, there came a point where I really didn't know if God was ever going to use me again. I thought I had gone.